This man is a five-tool player. He has it all in that area. Sense of humor, sense of duty, grasp of the subject, passion for certainly his game and for family, and those principles that he espoused to be true in the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Gary Pullins got recruited to play baseball at BYU after 2 years playing at a junior college in Arizona.
I was a Cougar. I was a Cougar because of Glen Tuckett and his wonderful family.
Considered one of the best second basemen in BYU history, Pullins played on a team that went to the College World Series.
The 1968 team, of which I was privileged to be a member, was his first team that actually got to go to the College World Series.
In order to get there, they knew they needed to play the game in the right way, something they were taught by Coach Tuckett.
And when Coach Tuckett spoke, believe me, all eyes and ears were on him.
After graduation, Pullins played in the minor leagues, but eventually followed in Tuckett's cleat marks and became a coach, starting the baseball program at Utah Valley University, then working as the head coach at BYU for 23 years, the winningest baseball coach in BYU history.
They say that in teaching individuals and helping them mature, you need a village. But if the mayor of the village is Glen Tuckett, things are going to get done correctly and in the right way.
Glen Tuckett grew up in Murray, Utah, at a time when all boys played baseball, but he was a little different than the others.
My love for sports started when I was very young. That's all I ever wanted to do. And, a lot of people, when they're kids, say, well, I want to be a cowboy or an Indian or a fireman. Or I never wanted to be anything except a ball player. That's all I ever wanted to do, is to play ball.
Tuckett got drafted to play second base in the minor leagues for the Salt Lake Bees, then was traded to the Salem Senators and later the Lewiston Bronx.
I got a chance to play, and I got a chance to play pro ball for 7 years.
Baseball was the American pastime in the 1940s, and Tuckett hoped to play in the major leagues, like his baseball idols. But even though he loved the game, he didn't reach the top ranks.
Or a great catcher.
I was not just an average minor league baseball player.
After earning a bachelor's degree of science in 1953, Tuckett got hired as the head baseball coach and assistant basketball and football coach at Salt Lake's West High School. He enjoyed competing against the crosstown rivals at Granite High, led by another young football coach named Lavelle Edwards.
Lavelle was at Granite High School when I was at West. We coached football against each other at that time.
Tuckett loved coaching high school kids, but in 1959, LDS Church-owned Brigham Young University hired him as an assistant football coach and the head baseball coach.
But I came to BYU as the head baseball coach, assistant football coach, and a professor in health science. It's a busy time.
Back then, the university didn't have a lot of resources or money. Tuckett was the only full-time baseball coach.
And I coached them all by myself, and we didn't have any help, didn't have all these administrative assistants or groundkeepers or trainers. They were spread pretty thin. It was just us, and it was fun.
But Tuckett found with the right motivation and some hustle, his kids could compete with the best college ball players in the nation. In 1958, and again in 1961, BYU's team qualified for the College World Series, but had to withdraw because some of the games were scheduled on Sundays, and the BYU coaches and players refused to play on the Sabbath.
One time we were really ruled out. We were really qualified, but we couldn't play because they had to play on Sunday.
But in 1963, the NCAA added what they called the BYU rule, which made it possible for teams from religious schools to compete in the College World Series without having to play any games on Sundays.
So when all that happened, we began to do some work to lobby and get to our friends in the NCAA and make sure that we got the rule passed so that we could have an opportunity in all the sports to participate in NCAA championships, and we've been accommodated ever since then.
He finally got his chance in 1968 as he led his team to the College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska. After a decade on his own, Tuckett knew he needed some help to take the program to the next level. Hoping to bring better recruits and more respect to BYU, Tuckett somehow convinced a newly retired World Series champion pitcher from the Pittsburgh Pirates, named Vernon to come help coach the BYU team.
I got this call from Glen, and he says, "How'd you like to come to BYU and be an assistant coach for me?" He says, I've been running this program by myself, for a long time, and I would appreciate to have some help, and especially from a Cy Young Award winner. And I said, well, I like being outside.
Law and Tuckett had never met or worked together before, but developed a lifelong friendship and bond.
I don't know how many times I have thanked him for moving me from Idaho up here, because it has given my children an opportunity to know a lot more about the church.
In 1971, the two coaches took the BYU team back to the College World Series. They lost the first game against Harvard, but beat Mississippi State, then lost the next one to USC, and came back to Provo with a commitment to return to the national standings.
Coach was very competitive. He wanted to win, and he worked hard and had a desire for his teams to do well. That was his expectation of his teams too, to do well.
Tom Morris played for BYU from 1976 to 1979, the younger brother of Jack Morris, who took his talents to the major leagues.
I don't know who Glenn actually talked to, but somehow one of our friends who knew the university system wrote him a letter saying, hey, there's this kid out here in St. Paul, Minnesota. He's a good athlete, and you should look into him. And Coach did, and they eventually recruited Jack.
BYU wanted both brothers, so he ended up in a Cougar Blue uniform. With some hard work and some hustle, Tom had a great career at BYU, even though he didn't take his talents to the professional level. He says Tuckett and Law taught him a lot, both on and off the field.
So on a personal level, he really looked after you and wanted you to make good decisions, and was kind of spiritually coaching you and teaching you. He was a teacher.
After baseball, Morris earned a PhD from the University of Wisconsin and came back to BYU, where he taught geology for 28 years.
A little emotional here. But I would say the legacy is his players and the good men that he helped mold, and the good things that his players have done.
Tuckett always made it clear to his players that he had respect for God, family, and baseball, in that order.
But that came from a dad he showed the way. He didn't tell me, he showed me how to do things, and I'll be forever grateful for his influence in my life.
In 1976, the university promoted Tuckett to be their next athletic director, taking the place of Stan Watts.
It was a good time. I'd coached for 17 years and coached 6 years before that in high school, and I'd worked and got my doctorate while I was teaching and coaching, and thought, well, this is a pretty good time. He's gone there to three things: says, don't cheat, don't go over your budget, and don't lose. And so, okay, President, I get the message.
Now Tuckett oversaw all the athletic programs at BYU. In this position, he was able to renew his friendship with his old crosstown rival football coach, Lavelle Edwards.
He did a good job. He's the right man at the right time for that job. I would venture to guess that there wasn't an athletic director football coach association that even came close to ours.
Under Tuckett, BYU sports flourished. The basketball team went to the Final Four in 1981 under Coach Frank Arnold, and with this last-second shot by Danny Ainge.
Against Paxson, 5 seconds, inside, Ainge scores with 2 seconds, 1 second on the clock, it is all over, it is all over, but it looked like Notre Dame was going to have Kelly Tripucka as the hero. The hero's banner is lost by Notre Dame, and the hero's banner goes to Danny Ainge. Frank Arnold and Brigham Young have won this glamour game 51-50.
Danny Ainge was one of those kind of do-everything kids, could play everything, just very gifted. and a talented young man in every way.
In football, Coach Lavelle Edwards decided to try something new, throwing the football, something not commonly done in college football at the time. This brought a string of strong quarterbacks to BYU, like Mark Wilson, Gifford Nielsen, Jim McMahon, Steve Young, Robbie Bosco, and Ty Detmer. Few people in the nation had heard about BYU, but Edwards' winning record in the Western Athletic Conference and wins in the Holiday Bowl helped put BYU on the map.
Kind of magical. It was a magical time for BYU.
In 1984, BYU's football team went undefeated and won the NCAA College Championship.
Campbell throws it.
We're so proud of that ball club. That was a good football team. Lavelle and the staff did a great job, and everything fell into place.
Edwards did all the coaching, but Tuckett helped with recruiting and did the scheduling for the games.
I said, if we're going to get good, we got to play good people. And I told Lavelle, I'm not going to schedule you back to Granite. I'm not going to get you fired. And I told the same thing to Frank Arnold in basketball. But we're going to do better. We're going to schedule better.
It was really the partnership of Lavelle Edwards and Glen Tuckett that together put BYU on the national map.
Tom Fife played baseball under Tuckett. He loved sports and wasn't sure about giving up 2 years to serve as an LDS missionary. But he says Glen Tuckett encouraged him to go.
He looked at me and he said, I have a testimony of the gospel. You go on a mission and serve the Lord.
Fife played baseball at BYU when he got back, completed his degree, and went on to become a medical doctor.
So he was just an extremely good teacher and an extremely high-principled person. And that made a great impression on me and most of his players.
In 1990, BYU had another incredible football season.
Detmer gets away. Touchdown!
And quarterback Ty Detmer received the Heisman Trophy Award as the best player in college football.
Ty was very good, and I had the opportunity to be in New York with him at the New York Athletic Club when he received the award, and to be at the banquet and to see all of the Heisman Trophy winners, get to meet them and know them. And I kind of got to travel on Ty's coattail, and that was really fun and well deserved.
It was magic, and Glenn and Lavelle worked very well behind the scenes.
Ralph Sobel has worked as a sports information director at BYU for 41 years. Tuckett hired him, but Sobel said he always felt more than just an employee because Tuckett always ministered to him when he needed help.
I happened to go through a divorce, and that was a very trying time for me. And so he gave me lots of counsel during that time to help me along that difficult path when I was a single daddy.
Tuckett said that working in athletics at BYU was a challenge because the budget given by the administration didn't always match the needs.
That was the most difficult thing I had to do as a coach and an athletic director, was to get by on the budget that we had, which was so very hard to do.
He also said that recruiting was a challenge because many college athletes didn't like the idea of an honor code that prevented them from smoking, drinking, or having sexual relations outside of marriage.
But we're non-members. We had to do a pretty good selling job because they knew that the atmosphere was going to be a little bit different here. The environment was a little bit different. The expectations for their personal behavior were a little bit different, and we didn't gloss over those. We told them right up front, these are the things that we expect, and these are the things that we don't tolerate.
As the athletic director, Tuckett had to deal with any honor code violations by his student athletes.
These are the things that are expected of you, and there are not many second chances. This is it. This is the way we do business. Now, if you don't want to abide by these rules, gee, go someplace else. In fact, I'll make a phone call for you.
After 37 years of coaching or directing athletics at BYU, Tuckett decided it was time to retire. In 1994, the Alumni Association held a tribute to him that included this video presentation from friends and family.
I think it is safe to say that in NCAA circles there is no one currently living today who commands greater respect than does Glen Tuckett.
It also gave Tuckett a chance to say goodbye to BYU.
I took liberty with Camelot and said, let it not be forgot that once there was a spot that for one brief, shining 34-year moment that was known as Camelot. This is my Camelot.
Shortly after his retirement, Tuckett got a surprise call from the University of Alabama, asking him to come back and work for them.
I got a phone call from Roger Sayers, the president of the University of Alabama. And he said, Glenn, I'd like to fly out to Provo and visit with you. He said, I need some help.
Tuckett was able to help Alabama straighten out some NCAA violations and restored their great athletic programs.
But we got everything back and got it straightened out. And when we left, everything was in good shape. They figured out how to get in trouble again a time or two, but it was a great program. And it's a wonderful place. It's a great university.
After a year and a half, Tuckett retired again, moving back to Provo with his wife, Jo.
Had a great time. If I ever needed any Eagle food, I just go to Tuscaloosa. They treated me so nice, and Jo, they just adopted us there, and it was like the frosting on the cake.
Looking back, Tuckett says his career in athletics at BYU was filled with fun, friends, and doing things in the right way.
Just a great leader, just a guy that I think anybody that knew him enough, and anybody who played with him and interacted with him enough would totally respect Glen Tuckett. He's a man's man and a great leader.
And he never misses an opportunity to lift others. So while he has been visible, he has done so many things without any recognition.
But he could come across a little gruff sometimes, but he's actually a teddy bear inside, and you don't want to cross him. And that he's very loyal, and he will remember things like your birthday, or he'll remember your wife's name.
Whoever you talk to about Glen, you'll hear probably a lot of the same stuff, because they have such a love and respect for what he's the kind of person he is and has been over the years, You
want a Holiday Bowl watch, you guys? Got 18 of them there I can't give away. My grandkids won't even take them. I got that big backyard so I could play pepper with my kids, my boys, and I had four daughters. So all I do is mow it. If you make this work, you're going to get you an Oscar.
That sounds good to me.
Oh.